Before we begin today's story, take just a second to support the channel. If you enjoy emotional stories that feel real, stories about relationships, life decisions, and the quiet moments that change everything, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Every story shared here is meant to make you reflect, feel something deeper, and maybe even see parts of your own life a little differently. Now, with that said, before I tell you about the moment that almost changed my marriage forever, I need to take you back to a time when everything looked completely fine from the outside. In fact, if someone had asked me back then how my life was going, I probably would have smiled and said something simple like, "Everything is good." And in some ways that was true, but in other ways, it wasn't that. My husband and I had built what most people would describe as a comfortable life. We had a home that felt warm and familiar. Our schedules were steady and predictable. We attended family gatherings, celebrated holidays, and smiled politely in photos. From the outside, we looked like a stable couple. People around us often said things like, "You two are lucky." And I believed that too. At least, I thought I did. Because the truth is, a life can appear peaceful and successful while something much quieter is slowly changing beneath the surface. Sometimes problems don't arrive with shouting or conflict. Sometimes they arrive with silence. And silence is much harder to notice. Looking back now, I can't point to a single dramatic moment when things started to change. There was no big argument. No betrayal. No sudden crisis. Instead, the distance between us began in ways that seemed almost too small to matter. Little things. Small habits. Conversations that slowly became shorter. Evenings where we found ourselves in different rooms without really thinking about it. At first, I didn't question it. Life gets busy. People get tired. Routine becomes normal. But slowly I noticed something. We weren't asking each other real questions anymore. Not the kind of questions that open a door to someone's feelings. Instead, our conversations started sounding more like daily checklists. What time do you need to leave tomorrow? Did you pay the electricity bill? Do we need groceries? Practical things. Responsible things. But something important was missing. Connection. Point. One evening stands out clearly in my memory. It wasn't special in any way. Just an ordinary night. We were sitting at the dining table together, eating dinner like we had done hundreds of times before. The television was on in the background, filling the room with noise. Not because we were really watching it, but because silence had slowly become uncomfortable. My husband looked exhausted. His shoulders slightly slumped, his attention drifting between his plate and his phone. I probably looked tired too. After a moment, I asked a simple question. "Are you okay?" He nodded lightly. "Yeah, just work." And that was the end of the conversation. No follow-up. No curiosity. No one reaching across the table to ask more. At the time, I didn't fully understand what that moment meant. But now I realize something important. Distance in a relationship rarely begins with anger. It begins with indifference. Weeks passed. Then months. Our lives continued moving forward like a well-organized machine. We paid our bills on time. We attended weddings and family events. We smiled for photos and wished each other happy birthdays. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. But inside our home, something fragile was quietly shifting. We had become partners in responsibility, but not partners in connection. And there's a difference. A big one. Responsibility keeps a household running, but connection is what keeps a relationship alive. Without realizing it, we had slowly started living like two people sharing space instead of two people sharing life. During that time, I began experiencing a strange feeling that I couldn't easily explain. I didn't feel unloved. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, I felt something more subtle. I felt unseen. There's a quiet kind of loneliness that can exist even when someone else is in the room. A loneliness that doesn't come from being abandoned, but from feeling invisible. Like your thoughts and emotions exist quietly inside you without ever being noticed. That feeling can slowly change how you see yourself. It makes you question whether your voice still matters. Whether the person you once were is still visible to the person who promised to share life with you. Of course, I tried to explain it away. I told myself what many people in long relationships probably tell themselves. Marriage changes. Romance fades. Routine is part of growing older together. And maybe some of that was true. But deep inside, another thought kept appearing. What if routine had quietly replaced intimacy? What if comfort had turned into emotional distance? At the time, I didn't have the answers. And I certainly didn't expect that one unexpected conversation would force me to face those questions. The moment that started everything happened on an ordinary afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. There were no warning signs. In fact, it almost didn't happen at all. After work that day, I decided to stop at a small cafe near my office. I wasn't meeting anyone. I just needed a quiet place to sit and clear my mind before going home. For a few minutes, I wanted to exist without roles. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's daughter. Not as someone responsible for 100 small obligations. Just me. I ordered a coffee, found a small table by the window, and sat down. And that's when something unexpected happened. I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Daniel. Daniel and I had known each other a long time ago through mutual friends. We were never particularly close. Just acquaintances who occasionally crossed paths. But when he recognized me at the cafe, he greeted me with a warmth that immediately felt familiar. The kind of warmth people show when time hasn't erased their kindness. We laughed about how long it had been. About how quickly life seems to move once adulthood begins. After a few minutes, he asked if he could join me. It felt harmless. So I said yes. At first, the conversation stayed light. We talked about work. About how different life had turned out compared to what we imagined in our 20s. About how responsibilities seem to multiply as the years pass. It was the kind of conversation two old acquaintances might have after reconnecting. Nothing unusual. Nothing meaningful. At least, that's what I thought. Until he asked one simple question at one point in the conversation. Daniel paused and looked at me thoughtfully. Then he asked, "Are you happy?" I laughed softly. The way people often laugh when they're asked something unexpectedly personal. "Of course," I said. But Daniel didn't laugh. He simply looked at me with quiet attention. Not in a romantic way. Not in a dramatic way. Just attentive. After a moment, he said something that surprised me. "You don't sound convinced." And suddenly, I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't know how to answer that question honestly. Was I unhappy? No. I wouldn't have described my life that way. But was I fulfilled? That question felt harder. And the longer I thought about it, the more I realized something. I had been avoiding that question for a long time. Not because I was hiding something dramatic, but because I had quietly accepted a version of life that required less emotional reflection. It was easier to stay busy, easier to follow routines, easier to keep moving forward without asking whether something inside me had slowly gone quiet. That afternoon at the cafe didn't create those feelings, but it revealed them. And once you become aware of something like that, it's impossible to completely ignore it.